You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. I've got a very great guest today, Joe Paterno. He's the author of a new book called Blitzed, the all-out pressure of our college football's new era. So Jay's also, in addition to being an author, he's a coach. He's also a commentator with roots that go back a long time in college football. The son of legendary coach Joe Paterno. Jay's been coaching for over 2 decades, including 17 years at Penn State. So we're going to talk about his book and all that stuff. So welcome, Jay.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell me a bit. I mean, your background's pretty obvious. You've been in and around football for a long time. Some people follow in their parents' footsteps, some not. But what made you want to follow in your dad's footsteps?
Well, when I was a kid, I would get up and kind of see what he was doing. And like a lot of kids, when you grow up, you kind of emulate the people that are in your house. And so that looked like something that I wanted to do. And, really got hooked and enjoyed the competition part of it and the back and forth and having to get ready every week for a game and that kind of thing. So when I got out of college, I decided to coach. I played in college. I got into it and it's a lot of fun. And it challenges you every day.
Yeah, I'm sure. Is it a crazy amount of work? Like, what's the life of a coach like?
Well, I've been coaching a while, but I mean, I do know what the hours are like from when I coached and what's going on now. But it's really become, and it's been this way for a little while, it's become really a 24/7 job because at the college level, pro level is different because, those are grown men and if they do things in their off time. But if you're a college coach and your phone rings at 12:30 in the morning, it's generally not because the academic advisor is calling you to tell you that 5 of your guys made Dean's List. They're usually calling you to tell you that, somebody's calling to tell you that somebody got in trouble or there's a family emergency or whatever it may be. So you have to kind of be in loco parentis with these guys, and that makes for some long hours.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're like a priest to them or like that kind of figure. You're a father figure. Yeah, you really have to get into their lives and you deal with all the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important part of college coaching that I hope will always endure, that it's not just a business relationship, that it remains a relationship where you're trying to prepare young men for life, not just to play games on Saturday afternoons. And that's really the allure of college versus the NFL.
How have you seen the players change and how you have to work with them over the years?
Well, I think now, in light of the most recent changes in college football with guys being able to transfer whenever they want, guys being able to start making money, but from name, image, and likeness stuff and other sources, I think there's an element of these guys were dealing with some mental health issues and pressures that they didn't have to deal with even 8 years ago, because being able to make money, there's pressure from families and from, Jay, why aren't you making this amount of money in your name, image, and likeness deal? And why aren't you doing this? And so now they've got to make money. They've got to perform on the field or on the court. And, oh, by the way, they got to be students too. And I think some of those mental health issues are seeping into and unfortunately, there's a real good movement on college campuses. I'm a trustee at Penn State, and just from a standpoint of not just with college athletes, but campus wide, there's a destigmatization of mental health issues, and students and younger people are much more willing to come forward and say, "Look, I need some help." So I think that's been a good thing. But those pressures are really creeping into the college football guys.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my college years. I mean, I wasn't on any sports teams or anything, but yeah, it was hard enough with being away from home, making friends, going to school, doing all that stuff. And yeah, the friends I was in a fraternity, the people in my fraternity that did swimming or football or whatever it was. Yeah, they had a lot more to do than all of us did. Like the swim guys would be up at 5 a.m. practicing, and they had to do away, meets and all that and games. And yeah, it's a lot of pressure for someone so young, 18 to 22.
Yeah, and then when you put them out there on Saturday afternoons and there's 9 million people watching on TV and 100,000 people in the stadium, and they may be dealing with some things. And I think some of the things that that we used to talk to our guys about. We had a blue line on the practice, right when you came on the practice field. And that line, it's one of the great lessons I've ever gotten. The line was, when you cross that blue line, you can't do anything about anything else. So when you cross that line, you may have problems at home. You may have an ill family member. You may have a girlfriend that, you're not getting along with, or whatever it may be, or you may have problems in a math class. Well, when you're on the practice field, you can't do anything about it. You have to focus in and lock in on that. But we're also taught to put those blue lines everywhere else. So when you walk into a classroom, you couldn't worry about your football stuff. You had to worry about what was going on in the classroom. And when I became a coach, it became a situation where I went home and went into my house with my wife and kids. I had to put myself there, not just physically, but also mentally, and understand while I'm in this particular situation, I've crossed the blue line. I'm dad now. So those are things that you got that we were always taught to kind of do, and those things are helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. I don't know how to put it, but I guess life lessons or coaching, like the mental game, how important is that? I know it's probably a cliche, but specifically, like how much time do you have to spend as a coach helping all these guys mentally deal with their lives and all the pressures?
Well, I think the thing about it is there's no one, everybody thinks, well, you just do it this way. There's no one cookie cutter way to handle everybody. They're not robots. They're human beings, and everybody's got to know. Everybody's got a different way of learning. They got a different way of coping with things. Some people can handle criticism. Other people can't. Some people have more, are more resilient mentally and that's not to be derogatory to some people. Some people can let criticism roll right off their back. So the most important thing as a coach is you got to get to know these guys as well and understand what's going on in their lives, and then be able to get a feel for how you can coach them. And that's the biggest challenge in coaching. And it's whether it's coaching or whether it's management, large company or a small company, those things are vital. So really building a good team and having success.
So what do you look for if you're I don't know if you're doing the scouting or if you have other people do it for you, but what do teams look for or coaches look for in a player?
Well, I think at the college level, the first thing, I tell high school kids this all the time, and I used to say it when I was coaching too, it's, get your grades right off the bat, because the first thing in the college level, the first differentiator is going to be if I have two players that have the same ability. If one's a really good student and one's not, I'm going to recruit the really good student every time first, because I know that player is going to, I'm not going to be worried about chasing that kid to class. I'm not going to be worried about eligibility. And probably most likely that intelligence will translate into learning to do things on the field. So that's your biggest differentiator. And one of the things that people forget is when you're recruiting a guy in 11th grade, the 9th grade grades and the 10th grade grades are more important than their senior grades because they're already in. So it's those are the things you got to look for. And then you want to look for people that fit with what your program's goals are. I mean, we have always had at Penn State a program where academics are very, very important. And we would put that right out in front of kids and say, look, you come here, you have to go to class, you have to do these kind of things and handle these things. And if kids didn't want it, some of them would self-select out, and that's fine. It's better for them and better for us.
Yeah. How do you see the players change from when they first come in as freshmen till they're done being seniors? Like, is there a dramatic change? And like, what are some of the milestones that you'll see in the successful players that are getting there?
Well, I think that's the best part of college coaches. Every freshman arrives, they get there, they think that they're the biggest thing at their high school, and they're the big shot, and they walk in and they think they have all the answers. Then they get into their first 3 or 4 practices, and they're like, oh, everybody else here is just as good as I am, or at least they're in my league, and everybody here is fast, and everyone's strong. And then you see them go through a period where they don't think they have any of these. And then slowly but surely, as they have success in school and success on the field and things, then they get back to the point where they have all the answers again. So it's kind of a fun roller coaster where they, they're know-it-alls and they know nothing, and then they know it all again. And watching that development and that maturity happen is really what college coaching is supposed to be all about.
That's cool. Do you get any really cool feedback from families or from the players themselves, like that just makes you feel good? Like, it gives you a good reason for what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, all the time you hear from, I still hear from guys that coached 15 years ago that are tall and say, you remember when you said this to me? And, and I don't remember saying some of the stuff I said, but you never know when that one kernel of information or knowledge or guidance that you pass on to somebody is going to be the thing that really blooms into something big in their life. And that's what you hope. And you try and be upfront with them about those things. I mean, it's always, those are the things when guys come back and you'll get a letter from a guy you haven't heard from 10 years or an email, and they'll say, I just want you to know, I just ran into a guy we coached a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, who was back on campus, and just talking about what it meant for him to have come through the program and the things that he learned and the lessons that were imparted to him. And, that's really what it's all about. It's, in that regard, being a college coach in many ways is much like being an educator, which is what it should be.
What about the process if, how do you, I don't know how, well, you must be very involved, but players that you see have the potential to go to AFL, NFL, up to the next level, what's that like for them? And what's that like for you?
Well, they all think they're going to go to the NFL when they get it. That's the one thing they all have in common, because they're all highly recruited. But I think the thing is, at some point they start to realize this is realistic, and you have to have conversation with them so that they are realistic about where, because they all think they're going to be a first round pick, and they're not. Obvious, only 32 guys get picked in this round every year in the whole country. So obviously and so, when you're talking, 134 teams at the highest level of football with 100 guys in each roster, you start to do the math, it's a lot of guys. So, I mean, it's fun to watch those guys develop. It's fun to see the drive and the excitement. And then, when they start to get ready for the draft and the draft comes around, their name gets called, that's fun to watch. And then to watch them go on and play in the NFL, it's really rewarding, because the starting salary is certainly going to outpace anything they would get with the degree they got. So they're able to do certain things with their money and for their families and things they otherwise would not have done. And that's rewarding.
I've heard, though, that NFL careers usually aren't very long because just the physical intensity and, the damage that people can suffer from being tackled, hit and all that. Is that planning taught to the people that are selected? Like, look, yes, you're making great money now, but you may have to make it last a very long time if your career is, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be.
Well, one of the groups I've consulted with started out doing financial literacy for NFL players, and then they started doing it for college players. And now they're doing education on name, moves, and likeness for college players. But one of the things that happens with NFL guys is they have to understand that, you got to get them to understand the cash flow that they're having right now is finite. I mean, a great player that plays 9 or 10 years, at age 30, they're all of a sudden the cash flow is gone. And the real challenge is, I coached a guy named Michael Robinson who's on the NFL Network now, and he's on NBC Sports. But from the first day he got to the NFL, he started working on his broadcasting career because he knew that was going to be fine. He's going to play, I think he played 8 or 9 years in the NFL before he got out. But it had a really good career, went to Pro Bowl, went to Super Bowl, and that kind of won Super Bowl with Seattle. But he had already started planning what was coming next because he was smart like that. And that's what the really smart ones are doing, is they're taking that money that they're making now and putting it places so that there's going to be a certain amount of income that comes off those investments. So that, those are the challenges that they have. And then to build a career after college or after pro.
Yeah. No, I see it with others like celebrities. Some of them, they go broke, even though they make tons of money. And some of them do all these other entrepreneurial ventures and they do really well and they make more money than they ever did. Let's say, being a celebrity or doing a sport. It's really interesting.
Well, my dad was that way. My dad, when he coached, in fact, in his 46th year of coaching at Penn State, he was, I think, 10th out of 11 in the Big Ten in terms of salary. He wasn't making a lot of money, but from coaching, made $1 million, $1.1 million. That's a lot of money comparatively. But he made a lot more money out of football because he found a way to get involved in other things and leverage some things and got him, made connections that could then turn around and get other investments and things involved. So he made a lot more money out of football than he ever made in it. And that's what the smart guys. And Franco Harris, who played for the Steelers for years, same before he passed, he had much more success financially away from football than he did in football.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. So what made you write the book Blitzed? What was important to you about doing it?
Well, originally, after my dad died, I wrote a book about him called Paterno Legacy, Enduring Lessons of the Life and Death of My Father. And after that, and I started writing a biweekly column for a site called statecollege.com back in 2009. And I've been doing that for now, the math, 15 years. So I wrote that book. It did really well. And then, I had another book in me, and that was, I was going to write about all the things that I had seen in college football, real stories about recruiting. I made some wild stuff, and so I started to write it as a nonfiction book, and I realized that this book was going to get tied up in lawyers and all 9 yards. So I wrote it as a novel called Hot Seat, which takes place at Ohio State University, and the head coach is told he's got a year to win or else he's going to get fired. So it takes you through the challenges ethically, integrity-wise, of what corners are you willing to cut, where are you willing to hedge on your integrity and your value system to keep that job and win. And when that book came out, a bunch of people said, now that we're in this new age with name, image, and likeness, and the kind of money now, and kids being able to transfer whenever they want, what do you think that's like? And having consulted on that in a lot of those areas for a couple of years now, I said, I'm going to follow it up and write this one because it isn't, that book came out 4 years ago. What's happened in the last 4 years? College football is dramatically different in every way, shape, and form. So this really was the impetus behind it. Again, keeping it as fiction keeps me from having to deal with lawyers, but the stories that are in this, I call it nonfiction fiction. The stories that are in this book are real. And it's really the first book that's really delves into what college football has become now. So in that regard, fans or even people just interested or curious as to what's going on, this will take you into what's going on college campuses. And really, there's a real threat to the integrity of academic institutions right now with what's going on in football. And as a sitting trustee at Penn State now, having coached at Penn State for 17 years and now as on the board of trustees, I've seen both sides. So there are a lot of things in here about trustee politics because there's a lot of trustee politics that go on around the high profile nature of college football.
Yeah, what's without spoiling the book, what's a story from it that you can relate where people were like, really crazy, just really maybe one interesting story?
Couple of things. Well, one is there are these groups called collectives that come in and they put together money and they get alumni and donors to give money and they distribute to players, essentially not to do anything for their name, image, and likeness, but essentially paying them to play. And some of the ethics and things that go on without giving away what goes on there would take as my mom used to say, take the paint off the walls in your house because it's so racy. Some of that it involves harassment. Some of it involves some really, really questionable things. And then you have other funny stories where, you have a player that he's got a car dealer that wants to let him have a Range Rover to use if he'll, do a commercial for him for the car dealership. And when the player says, the advisor says to the player, who's going to pay for the car insurance? And the kid says, well, I'm going to be on my parents' insurance. And the father says, oh, not for that car, you're not, because I'm not going to insure a 19-year-old to drive that kind of a car because the rates can be through the roof. So they got to figure that out. And at the same time, the advisor tells the kid, you're from out of state. So now you'll have to file an state income tax return in this where you're playing. And the kid says, geez, this is really adulting. I really didn't want this. And then as part of these collectives, they're paying players to go on social media and promote the collective to raise money, to pay players to promote the collective, to raise money to pay players. And you get where I'm going with this. It's kind of a cycle. And the head coach looks at him and says, that seems a lot like money laundering. And the room goes, try it. So, I mean, these are the kind of things that are just, these are everyday things now.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of temptations that, I'm thinking, I'm older now, late 40s, but I couldn't imagine how I would react being 18, 19, 20, 21 to these things. Like, yeah, they have no life experience and they need coaching on and off the field so they don't get tangled up in a mess.
Yeah, because you got to talk to them about what they put out on social media, because guys do this, social media. You got to talk to them about, you got people coming at you. Some of the contracts that people try and get these guys to sign in high school is, hey, we'll give you $150,000 as a junior in high school if you sign your contract with us. And what they then realize is, and some of this came from Major League Baseball, where they would go to the Dominican Republic and sign these guys to contracts, give them $150,000, and then they would attach themselves to 5 or 6 or 7% of that guy's lifetime earnings in Major League Baseball. People are trying to do that with guys in the NFL. And if you give a kid $100,000 and he makes $50 million in the NFL, and you're getting 6, 7, 5% of that, even, you've had a pretty good return on $100,000. And some of the guys don't realize that's what they're signing away. And then they, on the back end, they go, what do you mean that you get 5%? So those are some of the things that go on. And, whenever there's a lot of money involved, a lot of shaky things can happen. A lot of people come out of the woodwork.
In addition to money, I mean, does anyone send like women to seduce these players, or is that like movie type stuff?
Oh no, it goes on. I mean, there's the story. This was in the book Hot Seat, the first one. There was a very prominent player at a school, and an agent had, with an agent that was going to try and sign this guy, and everybody knew he was going to be a first round pick. It was a no. Everybody knew that. That was not even a question. And he had a woman that could best be described as a professional, get an apartment in town near where this guy lived and track him down and try to become, quote unquote, his girlfriend, the whole 9 yards, and then steer him towards an agent. So yeah, that goes on all the time.
That's so crazy.
I know. And, but it's one of those things that's why it's for coaches to have a real hand in it, and for these guys to understand that, you got to be a little skeptical these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Like, what are the ethics like? What is a coach allowed to advise on or participate in, and what are they not allowed to advise on or participate in in regards to a player?
Well, the NCAA will tell you, you really shouldn't get involved in any discussions with agents, especially now when you have agents. All these coaches have big time agents at the highest level, because, you have coaches making $9 and $10 million a year. And so obviously they have agents, but then you have players now are allowed to have agents. And some of those agents are in the same firm as the head coach's agent. So they should stay out of those kind of discussions. They should stay out of discussions with NIL money, but that they should. Now, again, do they? That's up to the ethics of each. And the question is, ethically, what are you willing, where do you draw lines? I mean, you should not be compromising a kid's health, putting him at risk, especially with concussions and those kind of things.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be asking them to cut corners academically or cheating, that kind of stuff. So there's some real challenges.
Huh. Yeah, it must be tough. I mean, you have all these people whispering in their ear, metaphorically, they could transfer out, pretty much at will. They may have their own agent. You have your own agent. There's the parents, there's the school, there's the, the friends, there's the girlfriends, there's all these hustlers looking to make money on them. I mean, how do you navigate that?
Well, I think the most important thing, I think everybody has to realize that essentially you are in a situation where every coach is an independent contractor. And it's not necessarily they're loyal to dear old state or to Tech or, the university they work for. They have an agent that's saying, hey, leverage every dime you can get. The players are seeing this, and they're now essentially given the ability to jump from one school to the other at will. They've become independent contractors, and they've got people telling them, you should jump from this school to that school because they can give you more money. So, I mean, it is really the pressure on these guys. And that's one of the things where the mental health part comes in. That's part of the things where having really, really good relationships and building relationships with your players is vital if you want to have any kind of success.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think the way football is now, it's just different, but like, what's the good and the bad of it? Is there any good that's come out of this new system, or is it all kind of more pressure, more difficulty, harder on everybody?
Well, the truth of the matter is you never get anything for nothing. So it's, the players all want to be able to transfer. Okay, so now they want to get paid for name, image, and likeness. Okay, you can get paid for name, image, and likeness. Now they realize, well, the school isn't loyal to me either. So if I decide I want to look around and transfer, well, the school says, okay, well, you're done. Well, if I don't find the right place, now I don't know anywhere to go. So that is not good. If the players, they're being able to make some money off what they do. I think, I'm an old school guy that loves the way college football was for a century and a half. But I'm also realistic that we're asking players to go out there and really put some things in the line. Potential injuries, potential concussions, those kind of things. And the Big Ten last year made $1.1 billion in media rights for sports alone. And that's, the players are looking at and saying there's $1.1 billion being made because we play on team. And my head coach makes $23,000 a day. I should get some of this money because I'm the one that's, in the NFL, the players get paid the most because without them, it doesn't matter how good a coach. You could take Steve Sarkisian to the University of Texas, and you could take Ryan Day at Ohio State University and put them on the same field. And if the players walk off right before kickoff, no one's going to stick around and watch those two guys play cornhole. They're there to watch football. The players, and if they don't get this right, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that you see a walkout before a game like that.
Does that happen?
Not yet, but I mean, right now the NCAA loses every loss that they're in, and it's really changed the dynamic, and the players are getting paid. But I think I think collective bargaining is going to come to college football simply so it can settle the entire marketplace down, so to speak.
Wow. It's so crazy. I just can't imagine living like that. It's like, yeah, I don't know how any of you guys do it. The players, the coaches.
Well, it's one of those things, we kind of brought this on ourselves. Coaches started making so much money. If you go back to 1994, so you're talking 30 years ago, Phil Fulmer of Tennessee was the first coach whose contract publicly topped $1 million a year. About 10, 12 years later, you had another coach crack $3 million a year. And now, 12, 13 years after that contract, you've got guys that have now topped 8 figures. You've got $10, $11 million contracts. So the exponential growth in those salary has really set an example as to what this, people are now starting to notice all the money that's being made. So yeah, we've created the Frankenstein of, that's now run amok.
Do you interact with other coaches, or like, do they all stay to themselves, or is there like a coaches group that meets up?
I've been out of coaching for a couple of years now in terms of the active part of it. As a trustee and a consultant, I still talk to guys that I've known for years in coaching. So yeah, I mean, we talk about it. And now that I'm not necessarily coaching against these guys, we can have some very frank conversations about what things are going on. And that's part of what fueled this book, are conversations. And one of the things that drives the main character in this book is this constant pursuit. There's always, once you get into coaching, it's very hard to envision your life without. And you think it's going to last forever. It doesn't. And your day will come at some point. But you're always there's this pressure to outrun somebody that wants your job, or somebody who wants to get you fired, or somebody, there's this pursuit. And you could have all the lofty principles that you want. But at the end of the day, your fan base doesn't eat principles. They only eat wins. So you've got to do the things you can within your principles to win. But yeah, so coaches, they're all in the same boat, but they all kind of, there's no coaches union in college football, because they're all kind of looking at each other and saying, well, I want this job, and I'd really like to have your job, and those kind of things. So there's really no honor among thieves, so to speak.
Really? Do you interact with people much in the NFL, like those coaches and, players and stuff, or when you were coaching actively, did you?
Yeah, I know some guys that are coaching the NFL now, and it's a little different in the NFL because everybody's upfront about what it is. And, we have a salary cap, and we pay this guy this much and that guy this much. And if another team comes in and can pay him more money, he's probably going to leave. So there's some, it's more out in the open that way. Whereas right now in college, there's no salary cap. There is no sense of having to report what you're making in terms of NIL money and that kind of stuff. So everything's a guess, and everybody's lying to you. When you're recruiting the kid will tell you, hey, Texas offered me $800,000. If I go there, what can you guys do? Now, Texas probably never offered the guy $800,000, but he's going to see if he can get it. And his agent's going to see if he can get it. So, I mean, those kind of things go on, whereas in the NFL, it's all out in the open. So it's a different situation. And the playing field is leveled in the NFL in terms of everybody has the same salary cap.
How, just for people that, don't know, like, how much faster and harder and tougher is it to play in the NFL versus college, Division I?
Oh, it's a big jump. I mean, the NFL, everybody can run. Everybody can run, and in college, you'll fall. Everybody can run in terms of as it relates to the general population. But in terms of, you can find some guys when you're game playing in college. You can find some guys that aren't as good as your guys, and you can always find somebody to go after. In the NFL, everybody in that league can play. It really is a big jump, and I think one of the things that comes back from guys that I coached when they first got to the NFL was just. It's the same thing when guys from high school come into college. They realize, I was the greatest guy in my league, and now I'm with, 80 other guys that were the best guy in their high school league. So it's a really, really big jump. And with the money being the incentive, guys really, really, if you come in and join a roster, there's only so many roster spots. So there's an element of you've got to be really elite to beat out somebody to stay on that roster.
So I guess college players that go to the NFL, they're shocked once again. It's a whole new game, literally.
Yeah, I mean, they get there and they go, "Oh my gosh, these guys are so good." And some get there and some of them aren't phased. They're ready to go to work and they get after it. But they do come back and tell you how fast the game's and how much faster you have to think and react and do certain things and process information. Because that's one of the things I think people don't realize about football is the game happens so fast. And you have to process a lot of complex moving parts. If you play quarterback in college or in the NFL, there's 11 guys on the other side of the ball. You're holding the ball, and they all want the ball. And they're going to do a lot of different things to get the ball from you. And you have to be able to recognize and see things in a way that it becomes instinctive. It's, when I coached quarterbacks, there were two types of learners that I would find. There were field learners and point-to-point learners. And the field learners could see the field and have peripheral vision to be able to process things without staring at them. And if you said, this is what the play is, they immediately could process where everybody was going and what was happening on the other side of the ball. Whereas your point-to-point learners would know this guy's going to do this, that guy's going to do that, that guy's going to do that, that guy's going to do that. And they would learn individual points and then start to process it. It would take them a little longer to process it, but different ways of learning. And that's the challenge of coaching or managing anybody when you deal with human beings, trying to figure out how people learn and adapt to what they do.
Yeah. Do you see that you have to have a certain personality to be a quarterback versus like a tight end versus, a lineman? Does it splinter along those lines or no?
Well, to be successful, yeah, you really got to be different. You've got to be able to, because you're the leader. At the end of the day, when at the end of a game, when people watch a football game, whether they're football junkies or not, everybody's got an opinion on how the quarterback played because he's the guy that everybody sees and they look at every snap. Every play, he's getting his hands on the ball and doing something. So yeah, you have to be able to deal with criticism. You got to be able to deal with praise is the same. I mean, there's the old Rudyard Kipling poem, if you can deal with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, you've got to be able to do that on a regular basis as a quarterback. Whereas, if you are tight end and you have you just play okay, most people won't even notice. Now, if you drop a big pass, they'll notice. But the mindset and the information that a quarterback's to process in the course of a game, it requires a supercomputer type brain to be really successful. Whereas some of the other positions, they can the game doesn't come as fast as them.
Any positions that have a unique personality, like linemen and stuff, like what are they like, versus a quarterback?
Well, the kickers are by far they're the biggest loners because they're generally during practice when everybody's working on offense and defense. They're kind of they've done their kicking for 15 minutes in a 2-hour practice, and they're just kind of hanging around. They're a whole different personality. Offensive linemen, it requires just a relentless toughness. You have to play the game really because it's such a physical, collision-filled game. You have to play the game on the edge of rage, but not over it. And that's always very difficult to master that fine line. That's why you see guys swinging at each other and getting stupid penalties. The receivers, I mean, they've got to be out there. They'll drop a pass. They got to have no conscience about it. If you play defensive back, you're going to get beat at some point. And if someone beats you deep, you got to come right back and play. So every position not only requires a physical difference, a lot of it requires a mental difference because, if you're playing defensive back, you're the last line defense. So, I mean, you've got that kind of pressure on. Whereas if you're up front, you're worried about really being in essentially a UFC fight or a fist fight with a guy across from you for 60 minutes. And it's the same guy most of the game. So, I mean, those kind of things are, again, every position is different physically and mentally.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Do you know a lot about other sports? Like, do you think that football prepares people uniquely versus other sports, or are other sports too different? Or, again, there's only so much you could fit in your head. I mean, when you look at other sports, what do you see?
Well, I think the unique thing with football is that you have a very it's really specialization. In basketball, you have 5 guys, they play offense and defense. In soccer, everybody's on the field, the whole time. Whereas in football, if I play offense and I'm the quarterback or I'm an offensive lineman, I got a job to do. And I got to be the best. I have to really focus on that and be the best that I can be at that position. And I've got to win my one-on-one matchup every play as best I can. But I also have to then, from a a standpoint of building a team, I have to trust that the other 10 guys in the field with me at the same time have all done that. And there's a challenge that, when you're in the locker room, you want to make sure that everybody else is doing that. So there's a leadership that has to be there in football. In the same token, if I'm playing offense and our defense is on the field and we have a 4-point lead and there's a minute to go and they're driving down the field, I have to trust that the 11 guys on defense are as committed as I am. And that's where the leadership part, being a captain of a football team is probably one of the most unique captainships in all of sports, because you've got to make sure that everybody buys in. You got to make sure everybody is doing their job to the best of their ability. You've got to have the guts to call them out if they're not doing it, because they're all, you're relying on them to do it at a time when you can't be on the field just based on the rules and based on, what your role is.
Okay. This is really fascinating. I mean, really, really fascinating call. So the book, it's available everywhere books are sold. Like, what is the, I just recently got a copy. Thank you, by the way. Way to go through it. But, how can people get it? When can they get it? Let's go to that.
It's out now. Amazon is probably Amazon.com, and my website, JV Paterno, JAY, the letter V, Paterno, PATRNO, JVPaterno.com are the two easiest places to get it. And so it's out. And really, I think people will enjoy seeing behind the curtains. This is really the first tell-all tale of what's going on in college sports right now, college football right now, because it's so new. And because it's nonfiction, fiction, so to speak, I can tell the truth without worrying about getting sued. So, which is one of the reasons I made it a novel. I wanted to not get sued, and I did not want to go start my car up and have it blow up some morning because I told some story that somebody didn't want out there. Not that it would blow my car, but it's a metaphorical reference, obviously.
I know what you mean, but it's like you said earlier, when it comes to a lot of money involved, or, the reputations of these people and their livelihoods and all that, anything goes. So I understand. Yeah. Okay. Well, very good, Jay. It's been a great call. I really appreciate you being here, and it's great learning from you. So thank you.
Yeah, I really had a lot of fun, and I really appreciate the questions. You made me think about a lot of things, some of which I hadn't thought about in a while. It was really stimulating. I appreciate that.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.